had a horse farm that bordered a vast forest and a well-known river in East Tennessee. Didn't do much farming there. Some vegetables, mostly stabled and raised quarter horses. Anyway, I had 4 younger brothers and a neighbour that was a couple years older than me. This was the early 90s, and all we did was hunt those woods and fuck around exploring all the time. We weren't supposed to cross the culvert of the river into TWRA land, mostly because we weren't supposed to hunt there, and our parents didn't want us getting into trouble. One day, when I was like 13, we stopped going there for a different reason. We were way deeper into that part of the forest than we were supposed to be. Further than we had ever been before, when one of my brothers noticed a pine thicket that had a bunch of trees, 14-footers, that were broken off at about 8 feet and all laying pointed deeper into the woods. It was just a small stand of pines, but I'd say there were 24 trees all snapped off and pointed in the same direction. My first instinct when I saw those trees was absolute dread. I knew that wasn't natural, and I wanted the fuck out of there. My neighbour was a complete psychopath. I always thought he had a death wish. He wanted to explore the timber that was across a small clearing where this abnormality was pointing. Something in me was screaming to get the hell out of there, but he and 2 of my younger brothers were determined to see what was beyond that small clearing. About the time we crossed into the clearing, we heard what sounded like someone coming through the woods where we had just been. At this point, I was completely terrified, and my neighbour and brothers were laughing at me, calling me a pussy, and just giving me absolute hell about it. When they walked back towards the pine thicket, I went wide and was taking a long way around back to the trail that would take me to where I wanted to be. My position, having backtracked, had me about 50 yards from them and that thicket, but I could see them. All of a sudden, I hear screaming, see my neighbour come flying through the air, and my brothers yelling and crying and heading my way. At first I didn't see it, but after this thing, oh my God! It still unnerves me. This thing let out a scream that you felt more than you heard. It had to be 10 feet tall, human looking and covered with jet black hair. At this point we all were running for our lives, and this thing didn't give chase, we didn't think. We ran for what seemed like miles, and when we couldn't anymore, we all collapsed on the ground, just on the line for our property. We were all hysterical, but this thing had picked my neighbour up and launched him 20 feet in the air. It broke his collarbone and everything. As we were composing ourselves, that damn scream again, and it was close. We never saw it again, but it got its point across. We never went back there again. We didn't tell our parents what happened until about 2 years ago. I'm 41 years old, and our neighbour to this day refuses to talk about it. We told our parents that he fell out of a tree, and we all got scared that day. What were we supposed to tell them? That a Sasquatch threw Jason like a baseball and he broke his collarbone? Anyway, that's my buried trauma from childhood. My name is William Benson, and for 27 years I ran a farm in Holt County, Nebraska. Now I live in a nursing home in Sioux City, and the doctors say I have senile dementia. But what happened that autumn I will never forget, even if the Lord decides to take away the last of my reason. That autumn of 1997 was damp and cold. It rained for weeks on end, The fields turned to mud, and we couldn't harvest the corn on time. Everyone was in a lousy mood, and to top it off, my back was acting up an old injury flaring up again. To make a little extra money, I agreed to look after the neighbour's farm, while John Murphy took his wife to the clinic in Omaha. Cancer, God damn it. John had about 100 head of cattle, mostly Herefords, and a bunch of chickens. That Saturday, I finished my own chores and drove over to his place. I just needed to check the waterers and put out some feed. As I pulled into his yard, I immediately felt something was wrong. Silence. An absolute muffled silence. Even the wind seemed to have died. Normally, you hear the chickens clucking, the dog barking, the cattle lowing when they hear an engine. Here nothing. I killed the engine of my pickup. The silence pressed on my ears so hard they started to ring. The first thing I saw was the dog. John's dog, a big Australian shepherd named Blue, was lying in the middle of the yard. I walked over. He was dead. But that's not what broke me. His neck was broken, just twisted, as if someone had taken his head and turned it until it couldn't turn anymore. No blood, not a scratch, just a dead dog with its head bent at an unnatural angle. My heart started pounding in my throat. I yelled out, "John? Hey, anyone here?" Silence. I walked towards the barn. The door was slightly open. Inside, there was a heavy, sweet, metallic smell. One I'd never mistake for anything else, the smell of fresh blood. I threw up right there on the threshold. Inside was a slaughter, but not like regular butchering. This was senseless extermination. Half the cattle were dead. They lay in heaps, and every single one had a broken neck or a crushed skull. I saw a bull, must have weighed close to a ton, hanging from a stall partition, its horns hooked over the top rail. Who, and more importantly, how, could have tossed a 1.5 ton animal up there? I ran out of there. I wanted to get in my truck and leave, call the sheriff, but my damned sense of duty to my neighbour pushed me towards the house. The door to the house was wide open. In the hallway, I saw John. He was sitting with his back against the wall. His eyes were open, staring right at me, but he'd been dead for hours. His body, it was flattened. Not torn apart, not crushed into a pulp, but flattened, as if squeezed in a giant press. Bones stuck out from under his skin at impossible angles. And the silence, that same damned silence. I backed towards the exit, and then I heard it. A sound coming from the basement. Wet, heavy steps on the concrete stairs. Slop, slop, slop. I wanted to run, but my legs turned to jelly. From the darkness of the basement, it began to rise. I can't describe exactly what it looked like. Every time I try to remember the details, they slip away like water through my fingers. But I remember the feeling. It wasn't an animal. It was something ancient, hungry, and utterly alien to this world. It had long, unnaturally long arms that reached the floor, and grey, glistening skin. It moved in jerks, like a cricket, but its head was turned completely backward. It was looking at me over its own shoulder, and in the emptiness where its eyes should have been, there was only hunger. It smiled, a human smile on an inhuman face. I don't remember running out. I only remember flying down the road in my pickup, the pedal floored, screaming until I lost my voice. The sheriff found me later in a ditch 10 miles from that farm. The police reports later called it a gas leak and mass hysteria. They identified John and his wife. They found her in the basement, in the coal bin by their dental records. The cattle with the broken necks. Official version said wild dogs or coyotes spooked by a wind generator. And the bull hanging from the partition? They never found it. No one believed my story, and within a month, I was diagnosed with a mental disability and put away. I don't know what that thing was, but sometimes at night, when the nurses turn out the lights, I hear those steps. Wet, heavy ones. Slop, slop, slop. They're coming up the stairs. And I know that this time, it's coming for me to finish what it started. And its smile is still the same human, on a face that could never belong to a man. When I was young, I lived on a farm in rural Oregon with my parents. I was the only child. We weren't a big commercial farm, just a family type thing. We had 5 cows, 3 horses, a small herd of goats, 2 dogs, and 1 chicken coop. We also had some Indian runner ducks we kept mostly as pets. We didn't really make any money off the place, just enough to sustain the animals and a little extra for ourselves. Money enough to take a decent vacation every couple of years. Dad had his other job in town, an insurance agent. He was the only one around, really. The town wasn't more than about 1,500 people. Mom gave horse riding lessons as well. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. It was really an easy life, or at least it could have been a lot worse. I went to school, Dad went to work, Mom took care of the animals, then we all had dinner together every night, and I would go to bed while Mom and Dad had a beer or two and watched the news. Sometimes at night I would hear things outside, mostly just normal stuff. The cows or horses would get spooked by a coyote or something, or I would hear the dogs chasing a rabbit, barking their heads off. Every once in a great while we would find a chicken dead. Dad would always tell me about it, but never let me see the body, although I asked frequently. He would keep Mum and I inside until he had gone out, did whatever he did with the body, throw sawdust over any blood, and then life would go on as normal. I assumed it was foxes, as I had seen a couple of them out in the pasture over the years, slinking around back and forth through the grass. The summer, when I was 10 years old, I remember helping Mum change the bedding in the horse stalls, when we heard a huge racket going on outside. If you've never heard the sounds of a horse in pain, you don't want to, trust me. It sounds almost like a person screaming. Well, that's what we heard, and one of our horses, the Palomino, came running into the barn with a wound on its left thigh. 4 long marks, like claw marks, ran across its body for about a foot. It had blood running down its leg and was limping. I was so scared by the sight of that much blood that Mom locked the horse in a stall and made me go inside with one of the dogs. She told me to lock the door and stay inside until she came in to get me. I did. Eventually, Mom came inside and told me that the horse had hurt itself on the barbed wire that ran the perimeter of the pasture. We owned more land beyond that, but it was mostly forested. I guess I believed her at the time, but at dinner that night, I noticed Dad was being particularly quiet and Mom was talking a lot more than she normally did. She was being really animated, and I noticed that Dad had gotten his rifle out and set it by the back door. Usually he only did that when the coyotes had been acting up. That night I went to bed as normal, but I had trouble falling asleep. I turned on my desk lamp and decided to read comic books until I got tired. I have a very vivid memory of reading Uncanny X-Men and hearing the back door open. Looking out, I could see my dad by the porch light, lighting a cigarette and holding his rifle under his arm. He started walking over to the driveway and then turned to follow the fence line. I couldn't sleep until I knew Dad was back safe. I kept coming downstairs with the excuse of getting water to see if Dad was back in the house yet, and each time all I saw was Mum sitting on the couch in the living room, staring at a blank TV screen and looking worried, sighing occasionally. Eventually, about 4 inches the morning, I think, Dad did come back, and I was so tired and relieved that I fell asleep as soon as I knew he was home. He never told me what he did that night, but I never thought to ask. 2 months later, I was back in school. It rains a lot in Oregon in the fall, and this day was no different. All I could hear from my bedroom was rain hitting the ground and the aluminum roof of the chicken coop. There was light thunder in the distance, but it was slowly getting closer. I thought I had heard a coyote yapping out around the garage, or it could have been one of the dogs. I looked out, straining my eyes to see whatever there may have been. In a brief and distant lightning flash, I saw something. It looked almost like a person, but hunched over and with a long torso. It was taller than Dad, who was a good 6'4" at least. I just barely caught a glimpse of it on the near side of the garage. Then the light faded, and I didn't see it again that night. There was another dead chicken the next morning, the third in just as many weeks. I told Dad what I had seen the previous night. The colour went out of his cheeks momentarily, until he told that the storm must have been playing tricks on me. I accepted that. 4 months after that, we lost a cow. It was in the middle of the night, and we all woke up at the same time. There was a lot of noise in the pasture, but only briefly. The cry of a dying animal and a primitive, guttural yell that I had never heard before. Dad rushed up to my room. I could hear him running up the stairs to my room. He had his rifle in hand and opened my door. He saw I was awake and told me to stay inside no matter what and try to go back to sleep. I don't think I have to say that sleep wasn't really an option any longer, but I did stay in my room with a blanket held tight around my shoulders and staring out the window. Probably about 10 minutes later, I heard gunshots in the field. I don't know what he was shooting at, whether it was whatever had attacked the cow or the cow itself, trying to put the animal out of its misery. Dad rarely, if ever, talked about that night. I later found out that he had gotten to the cow only to find it ripped open on the ground, bleeding out from its torso. The shots I heard were him shooting the cow in the head. It kept going like that, for years. A chicken or a duck here and there, something bigger only very rarely. It sounds absurd, but I almost came to think of it as commonplace. I only ever caught glimpses of the thing until what comes next. It terrified me. It happened in the middle of the day, over the course of a long weekend, when my parents had gone to Seattle to see my uncle, who was ill. It was on a Saturday afternoon. I was 17 years old. I was out in the barn putting out food for the horses and the dogs. The horses were running around out in the pasture, and the dogs were asleep in the corner of one of the horse stalls. I heard something rustling in the tall grass outside in the pasture. The dogs looked around a little bit, but didn't seem to mind. I assumed it was just one of the horses waiting for me to leave so they could eat. I kept going about what I was doing, and in several minutes I thought I heard breathing. I turned to look, and it was standing in the door, tall as hell, even hunched over. The sun was streaming in behind it, lighting up all the dust in the air around it like some kind of sickly halo. It was looking at me, considering me. Maybe it was trying to decide whether or not I was food. I remember swearing, turning and running as fast as I could for the house, not even thinking. Panic causing my legs to move. It was behind me, not even breathing hard. I heard its feet hitting the ground in a constant rhythm. I got to the house, opened the door, slammed it behind me, and locked it as fast as I could. I tore through the house, locking every door and drawing the blinds on every window. I could hear it snarling outside the back door. The dogs were barking at it, but they wouldn't try to attack the thing. It was too big and they knew it. It roared at the dogs and they ran off, probably to hide in the pasture. I went to my parents' bedroom and got Dad's rifle. I loaded it, set up a chair in the living room facing the back door, and waited. It started prowling around the house. I could hear its feet crunching on the gravel of the driveway and the wooden planks of the back deck. It kept walking back and forth. I thought about trying to look through a window to see it, but I was too scared. Eventually, after hours of hoping it would go away, the sun went down. I turned on all of the outside lights and went up to my room. I opened my window with the rifle in my hands, hoping to be able to pick the thing off from above. I saw it lurking just beyond the glow from the porch light. It had long, sinewy arms and walked on bent knee. It was by the chicken coop. Then it disappeared from view. I heard the chickens squeaking and screeching. The thing reappeared with a dead, bloody chicken in its hands. It bit off one of the wings with jaws that were dripping with slime and drool and let the dead bird drop to the ground at its feet. Then it looked at me. Its eyes made contact with my eyes. It turned away again, back to the chickens. It came back with another bird, mutilated it in front of me, and dropped it. It went back again and again. I should have taken a shot at it, but I was astounded and confused, trying to figure out what it was doing. Then it hit me. It was a show of power. It was showing me that it was stronger than me, that it could do whatever it wanted to do because I couldn't stop it. At the same time, I felt powerless and sickened, powerless because what it was saying was true. If it was just that thing and me, I wouldn't stand a chance. Sickened because I realized what kind of intelligence it would need to be able to convey that message. The thought shook me out of my stupor, and I remembered the rifle at my side. It was heading back to the chickens, and I decided that when it came back, I would take my shot. It strode back to the porch, almost arrogant, walking on bended knee with those arms so long that the chicken was nearly dragging on the ground. I raised the rifle up to my eye and tried to steady myself. My heart was beating so hard I could see the rifle shaking ever so slightly in rhythm with each heartbeat I could hear pounding in my own ears. It raised the body to its mouth, and just as it was about to put the chicken's head inside, I squeezed the trigger. The crack of the gun echoed in the now shattered quiet of the nighttime standoff, and I heard it howl, a painful, loud, startled howl. I had hit it on the outside of the shoulder. It ran off into the night. I never saw it again. It was still out there though. It still killed chickens and other things, more often than before.